All right, it's 5:31, so we just want to get started to be respectful of everybody's time. First, I'd just like to thank everybody for being here, for taking time out of your busy schedule to get information about the Wausau School District and hopefully the future that we're going forward with. Have a few folks that I just want to introduce. We've got Josh Vigut. Josh is our Assistant Superintendent of Operations. He's in charge of all the business and finance side of things. We also had Diana White. Diana is our Director of Marketing, of Communications and Marketing, so she's here with us as well. I'd also like to recognize Jim Boucher. Jim Boucher is our school board president. He's in the crowd as well with us tonight. So thank you all for being here. Again, I truly do appreciate you being here. Just a little introduction of myself. My name is Cale Bushman. I'm the Superintendent of Schools for the Wausau School District. This is my first year on the job. Prior to being the superintendent, the past 2 years I was the Director of Pupil Services for the district. Prior to that position, I was the principal at Wausau East High School. So I was on the east side of the river. Prior to that, I had served for 8 years as an assistant principal at Wausau West. So I was on the west side of the river. And prior to that, I was a special education teacher at Wausau East. So Brad Peck hired me in 2006 as a special ed teacher, and I've been in the district for all but 2 years. I was also a principal at Eau Claire North for a little bit. In addition to the professional side of things, I'm also a community member and a parent. I have 3 daughters. 2 of them have come through the Wausau School District. They were graduates of Wausau West. One is currently teaching at Wausau East as a math teacher. One is in college at Winona State. She's going to become a special ed teacher. She's already told me she'll be moving back into my house and going to be a special ed teacher at the elementary schools. And I have a junior who's currently attending Wausau West, and she said she's going to be a dentist, so she's probably going to do all right financially. But I bring that up just to say I'm invested. The schools matter to me. And what I'm going to also share is that being firsthand experience of having my kids come through the schools, I couldn't be more proud of the experiences that they've had. They've had opportunities given to them. They've had fantastic teachers. They've had great things that they've been able to be part of. So I couldn't be more proud to be the leader of the district and more proud to be a community member in Wausau. So one of the things is, why are we here tonight? And so we're going to talk a little bit about referendum, where we're at. And Diana, would you go to the first slide? And so the first slide I wanted to share is this. If revenue had kept pace with inflation since 2009, school districts like our district would receive about $3,300 more per year per student for school. So in Wausau, we have roughly 7,800 students. So you multiply 7,800 students by $3,300 per student, and it comes to $25.6 million that we would have in addition to our current budget. So if that were the case, we're not having this discussion. But we haven't kept up with inflation, and that's a reality that we're dealing with things. So I put that up there to kind of just set the stage for where we're at. I'm going to hand the microphone off to Josh, and he's going to talk a little bit more specific about some of the logistics.
Thank you. I want to talk briefly about how schools are funded in Wisconsin, and then more specifically about our situation in the Wausau School District. We will have time afterwards for questions, and then we'll hang around for as long as you want to answer questions. So if there's anything that comes up, please do ask us. Wisconsin public schools are funded primarily through a combination of state aid and local property taxes. In the Wausau School District, we get about 75% of our revenue from state aid and the remainder from property taxes and some federal money as well. Every district has a revenue limit based on a per pupil amount, so per student amount, and then your total enrollment. So that's how your revenue limit is calculated for every district across the state. Revenue limits were set originally back in 1993. They have not kept pace with inflation, not even close. The district, just like everyone else, has experienced inflation over the last couple of years, and our revenue has not kept pace with our expenses. Diana, if you don't mind. As I mentioned, rising costs due to inflation. One thing I did want to mention here is that we aren't alone in this situation. Many districts throughout the state are going to referendum. And what that does allow is the community control or community voice in the direction of the school district. So we are asking the community for your support. We have an outdated, inadequate state funding formula and really inadequate state aid to public schools in recent years. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, our budget situation specifically, we're projecting conservatively somewhere around $3.7 million budget deficit. That does include modest salary increases for staff, so we want to be transparent about that, but it does not include addressing our deferred maintenance needs throughout the district. Does take into account state level funding. We don't know what the governor's budget will be approved for next year, but it's based on what we know to date.
So some of the things that we've done, I just want to talk briefly about each of them. At the start of this school year, really into the summer, we had started an elementary task force to discuss consolidation. So in Wausau, we have 13 elementary schools, and elementary schools are really underutilized space. We have about, I think it was 1,300 empty seats throughout the district inside of our buildings, meaning buildings are not at capacity. So we developed an elementary task force. We did a lot of communication to the community to say, would you be willing to be part of this task force? Would you really be willing to put in some time to discuss the concerns that we have and issues that we have? We had about just short of 100 folks who had applied for that or said, yep, we're willing to do that. We did a random draw out of that group of people to come up with a group of folks, 15 teaching staff, 15 parents, and 15 people who don't have kids in school who are just taxpayers. And we brought them around for about 6 months and had some really thorough discussions about where our schools are at and what we need to do. And one of the things that they did through this through the task force was to look at our buildings through the lens of fiscal responsibility. What can we do that makes the most sense financially for our community with an elementary footprint? And they also considered quality of education, making sure there's some other factors, but fiscal responsibility was one of the big ones. From their discussions, they made a recommendation to the school board to close 4 elementary schools based on that lens. So Hawthorne Hills, Grant, Hewitt, Texas, and then Lincoln Elementary. And then Lincoln would be repurposed into a 4K. So these were all recommendations from the task force to the board. And we had taken this to the board and the board voted to make that happen. So we believe by closing down our elementary footprint, there's ways that you save money. And as a district, 80% of our budget comes from staffing. So right-sizing our staff through the consolidations to get to a point where we're saving some dollars through that. The process has been really good. I can't speak highly enough about the people who are on that elementary task force. They put in a ton of time and a ton of thought into it, and it's been well received. We've really been active about making sure we're taking care of our teachers, our support staff, our families, communicating as much as we possibly can with them to make sure that we're taking care of them. But that's one way that going into the future that we feel we're going to have some more fiscal responsibility and to have a smaller budget than we currently have. We've also gone about, last year we reduced 25 full-time equivalent positions throughout the district, made up of administration, teaching staff, and support staff. We've had salary increases that have been below CPI. And then we've had static budgets for buildings, departments, and capital maintenance. One of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit is the deferred maintenance that we have as a district. So part of the consolidation talks is we brought in CISA 10. And they do building assessments. So we had a very thorough building assessments of all of our elementary schools, and they went through and told us where are our needs and what do we need to do. And we found out that we have a lot of needs within our buildings. We have lots of HVAC concerns. We have roof concerns. We have just general maintenance. And part of what happens as a school district with budgets that get tighter and tighter is that your maintenance budget shrinks. So in the district, we have about $1 million for maintenance for our buildings. And that's a lot of money, but when you think about the size of our district, it's probably the equivalent of, if it's a house, you can keep your floors clean, you can make your windows clean, you can do all the smaller things. But if I gotta replace my roof, I'm not gonna be able to replace my roof. If I need to change my HVAC, I'm not gonna be able to change my HVAC. So there's a lot of deferred maintenance needs that we've accrued and will continue to, just because that's the nature of the beast. But in terms of what our maintenance budget is, has been really, really small for our needs. Next one. So we're asking, and I think we've talked about this a lot on the board when it comes to referendum. The referendum it's an ask. It's an ask of your community. Will they allow you to exceed your revenue limits? So on April 1st, we are asking the community if they're willing to allow us to do that. And the dollar amount that we've asked for is $8 million. And we're going to get a little bit into it in a couple slides as to why $8 million, but we'll hold on for that. So.
Okay, perfect. So what is an operational referendum? As Cale mentioned, we are asking for $8 million annually for 5 years. So this is a non-recurring operational referendum. It will not go on forever. Operational referendum, in large part, is used to support the ongoing operational needs of a school district. This is compared to a capital referendum, which is the other type of referendum that a school district can go for, and that for the most part supports buildings and new things like that throughout the district. So this would be a non-recurring operating referendum. Can be used to support staff salaries, deferred maintenance, things like that. So how would we use these funds? We would address our budget deficit, or mitigate our budget deficit, and maintain and enhance our student programming, not cut anything for our students. Attract and retain our staff. Our staff members have a huge influence on our students, and retaining them is our utmost priority. And we would also address ongoing maintenance needs. We have 2 elementary schools that do not have air conditioning, and we have 1 elementary school in dire need of roof replacement, and additional HVAC and roofing needs throughout the district. So that in large part, in broad strokes, is what the referendum money would be used for. And I can talk to this. So we've gotten this question a couple times. Why are you asking for $8 million? You just told me that your operating deficit is $3.7 million. So that $3.7 million does not include any of our deferred maintenance needs throughout the district. It does not include a new roof at one of our elementary schools. It does not include HVAC and air conditioning work at our elementary schools. It doesn't include anything for our high schools. So in large part, that is why. This would give us the ability to tackle and reduce our deferred maintenance while supporting the ongoing operating needs of the district.
So this is just a visual of what that looks like. And so when we talk about $8 million, like we said, $3.7 million is going to be for the budget deficit for next year, and that 4.3 is for deferred maintenance. Year 1. Year 2, we hope that our operating deficit decreases and more dollars go towards deferred maintenance. That's what we hope for as we move towards into the future. But the $8 million, it's a coupled. We have our deficit concerns, and then we have our deferred maintenance, and we'll use a sliding scale to make sure that we're taking care of our budget deficit and attacking our deferred maintenance needs. In terms of priorities, Josh kind of talked about it for deferred maintenance. One of the big things that we have is a roof at Riverview that's in dire need of repair, the air conditioning that goes on, and those are some of the things that we're really talking about that we need to take care of.
So zero tax rate impact, how can we do this without raising taxes? The Wausau School Board and District have chosen to prepay debt over the last number of years in order to save taxpayers' interest in the long term. You pay down your debt faster, you save interest payments long term. What we are asking for is the community permission to slow down how fast we are prepaying our debt and use some of that money to fund these ongoing operations and deferred maintenance needs. So in general, that's how we can ask for referendum and your support without raising the tax levy of the district.
That's one of the things, I think this is it's a pivot point for us as well, because I think it's a confusing concept. Because when I think about it, I say, well, you're paying down more debt, but you have this deficit. Well, just quit doing that. The reason we can't just do that is because we need your permission to exceed the revenue limit, which is what would occur. So we would slide the money not being prepaid or not on the debt defeasance and slide it into the revenue limit if the community allows us to do that.
So I think that's all we have before questions. Where should people go for more information outside of this session?
Hi everyone, we have a lot of information on our website right now, wausauschools.org. When you look at the homepage, right on the list of tabs, you'll see Referendum 2025. So if you just click on that, you can find frequently asked questions, information about zero tax impact, things like that. If you have questions at any point and would like answers to those, please know that you can reach out. You can call us at Longfellow, 715-261-0500. You can email communications@wausauschools.org. You can reach out to a principal, anyone you have a connection with, and please know we're going to get you those answers so that you can make an informed decision on April 1st.
And I think we'll open it up to questions. If folks have questions, I can run. And when I was the first principal, I was doing a faculty meeting like this, and I used the phrase Phil Donahue, and none of the teachers knew who Phil Donahue was, and I thought I was really old.
I guess I just got some more questions about the last item you talked about, the debt. We don't really have a whole lot of details on that. Is that some bonds that we're paying off faster than we normally would?
You're exactly correct.
And how many bonds are there?
So there are 3 total issues right now that we're paying off. It's before my time, but I think the first one's from 15-16, and then there's 2 from the most recent referendum in 2022.
So we got three bonds, and what's the balance on each one of them?
I'd hate to misspeak. I think the total outstanding is somewhere around 128 million, but please don't quote me on that. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
And how much extra are we paying on those bonds now that we're not going to pay anymore?
Great question. So this year we prepaid approximately $15 million on those bonds.
So we're gonna just stop prepaying on these bonds?
Based on what we know now, I would say we would slow down our prepayment, but not stop prepaying on the
So
debt.
we're going to continue to prepay on the bonds. How much do you expect to continue to keep prepaying?
If everything remained the same and we did 15 million this year, we would reduce that by about 8 million next year.
Okay,
I'd also like to say that.
So that's where I'm confused. If you reduce prepaying the bonds to 8 million, don't you already have your 8 million then?
Great question, and this is exactly what Cale said. So we can prepay our debt, we can do that, but we need the community's permission to use that money towards operations. We can't just take the money that we're using to prepay debt and use it for operations. It's a little in the weeds, but it's a separate fund for the school district, and we cannot use money from that fund to fund our operations.
Okay, if we keep prepaying the bonds, what's the terms left on the bonds?
If we keep prepaying them at the rate we're prepaying them right now,
Yeah.
5 to 6 years, but I hate projecting out that far because so much could change in those intervening years.
So then in 5 to 6 years, those bonds would be paid off if we keep prepaying, right? And then at that point, you're not prepaying bonds anymore, so you got, it's like when you pay your house off, you don't have a mortgage anymore. So then at that point, theoretically, if everything was well and good, the schools are right-sized and the money was spent well, the taxpayers would get lower taxes. We wouldn't need that money anymore.
So I would say that theoretically, that is true, based on what we know right now.
So based on what we know right now, and when you get a form that says no impact on taxes, well, there's no impact next month or a year from now, but in 5 years, we've impacted the taxes. Isn't that correct?
And I think it's very important to acknowledge that we are asking to prepay our debt slower. We are asking to use those funds in a different way. So-
I think this is unclear when you say no impact on taxes. When you boil it down, you're paying off bonds and you're paying off debt, and then you're gonna end up being able to lower the taxes. I mean, I just don't think it's all that honest. I think it's, you know, there's certainly some more details that could be put in there. I wonder if I could maybe stop in your office and look at the documents for the bonds and get some information on that.
Be great. You're more than welcome to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that actually is one of the things that we've talked about, is how do you communicate that? And then the struggles that we have is with some of the costs that we have with like the roof or the HVAC. If those should fail, then what happens, and do we have to borrow money in order to pay those types of things, and what's the balance with that one? But thank you. Oh, you got it.
Okay, I have a couple questions. The first one, has the district had issues retaining staff? And, you know, how does the pay for the staff in the Wausau School District compare to schools of equivalent size?
Yep.
I would say that we've had some issues in recent years retaining staff. We had a lot of staff turnover in recent years. Our pay is competitive with districts of our size, not throughout the state, but in our region. The risk that we run is that we would very quickly become not competitive and not as a desirable place to work from, just from a purely financial standpoint.
And I'd add that the recruitment of teachers right now is a very big concern for us. There's a teacher shortage, and so we have, in a lot of places, we have emergency teacher positions because we can't find licensed teachers. There's not enough of them, and that's similar in all of the areas that we have. So how do we recruit the best and brightest to come in to serve our kids?
Okay. The next question, what is the projection for enrollment for the district? Is it staying pretty flat, or is it increasing or decreasing?
Decreasing enrollment, yep. And from a district perspective, very comparable to all other districts too. There's fewer kids that are being had. Mm-hmm. So we were projecting, we actually have, if you're really interested, we have a Mark Roffers was a demographer that we had hired for the elementary task force. He did a computation of data through 2040. So it talks about all of what he's projecting it's going to look like in 2040, and we will see decrease in enrollment as we move forward. I will put a qualifier on that. The one thing that Mark had said as a demographer, he says the only thing that he can say is 100% accurate about projections is that they're not 100% accurate, that they're going to be a little bit different, but you can certainly see trends.
Sorry to make you run so far. Kale, you mentioned fewer people are having kids, so we've got less enrollment. But there's other factors of that too. I got a chart right here. This, you know, the homeschool have gone up to 2.3 million from 13 million in 73, and this year it's at 3.1 million. It doesn't have the latest one. So a lot of people are going to homeschool, and that's where I asked you earlier before the meeting. I said, you know, with all this stuff going on right now in Washington D.C. basically, and they're talking about the Department of Public Instruction. If you know, we just don't know for sure how that's all going to end up if things are going so fast, and it's kind of dizzying if you ask me. But if they go in to give kids school choice grants, and I'm no expert on it, I don't completely understand it, but if they give the grants, I've heard possibly directly to the families that put their kids in either home schools or some parochial schools or something, that could give a big loss to the population too, and I hope somebody discusses that a little bit and keeps a close eye on it, because I think Wausau East, what's the population of Wausau East, the occupancy?
The occupancy, is it 1,700?
But percentage-wise?
There's 900 students a little over 900 students at Wausau East, and then EEA is one of our charter schools that's there as well, so that's another 40.
And it's built for how many?
I wanted to say, I don't know exactly, but I want to say 1,600.
So that would put us at 60-some% maybe?
Yep.
I mean, that was a mistake to build that. I did see John Kreischer at a meeting once say, we never should have built that Wausau East. and it's the Taj Mahal out there, but it didn't, you know, all the money we put into it, it didn't seem like the test scores went up at all. But the cost per student goes up. So there's some more things. I mean, I don't know how we're gonna get better test scores and be more efficient with our dollars, but by having a Taj Mahal high school like Wausau East, it's a beautiful school. I love going there and going to events and ball games and stuff, but it's 65% occupancy, and we know year after year, it's gonna keep going down. It's not good, it's gonna be 50, then 42, then what is the plan for that?
More long-term thinking on that one right
Well,
now.
it's not that long away, it's already passed,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
it's 65 now.
Yeah.
And you know, the funny thing is, I think about this and I think, you know, where was the projections 5-10 years ago? You know, math would tell you if a kid's in 5th grade or 3rd grade in 7-8 years, 6 years, he's gonna be in 9th grade. Unless there's some big factories coming in and a huge influx in population, they're not gonna need that big of a school, but they built it anyway. You know, I don't know where they thought all these people were gonna come from. I mean, who made that? You know, John Kreischer was right. I did see him at a meeting, and it's on, I'm sure, on tape. He said he never should have built that Wausau East. So what, you know, I know you wanted to consolidate the 2 high schools, but do you have some sort of plan? Because, you know, it's pretty urgent, you know?
I really think that the elementary consolidation that we have put into place gives us a good plan moving forward, and then some of those broader discussions have to be brought back up to the table to say, what do we look like in 2040 so that we're being wise. And we actually, like, the fiscal responsibility is something that I take very seriously, and I know that the board does as well. When we were talking last fall, we had talked about that we were at a budget deficit as well, and we were saying, well, we really need the operating referendum, but the talk was, but we need to get our house in order first. And so the elementary consolidation was one of those big things to get our house in order so we could come back to the community to say, this is what we look like going into the future. And then to your point, what does it look like even further down into the future? Oh, I got 2 microphones now. I'll give you one back.
Where did the $15 million come from to pay off the debt that you restructured, I guess?
Good question. So where did the 15 million of prepaid debt, where did that come from? That's a great question. So we levy to pay off our capital debt, and that's exactly what we're asking for, is to reduce that amount that we're prepaying and use some of that money to support operations. So it's a great question.
Because 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when we approved the 120 million, debt was eliminated, and there was, because the previous debt had been paid off. And at that point in time, without this bond issue, our taxes would have gone down significantly.
Without the 2022 bond issue?
And
I think it's fair to say that if we were not paying back that capital debt, then the taxes would be lower.
But I'm just concerned, and we're hearing this word all over the place, transparency. You're paying off future debt using the taxes to do it. Then you come back and say, you're not going to have any tax increase because we need more money now. And there used to be, at one time, some governments anyway, set aside money to fix roofs, to fix this, to do this. You have no money set aside to deal with some of these. I understand some of it's hard, but it just seems there's a pattern here. You tax us to pay off debt and then come back and tell us, oh, your taxes aren't going to go up, because they do. They do go up. You're paying it off. Otherwise, it would go down. And that's what concerns me.
I appreciate the question. I really do, and the feedback. And I wish we were in a place where the state funding model had kept pace with inflation and we were able to put aside enough money where we didn't have to come to you and say, hey, the Riverview roof, it could go at any time, and that'll be $4 million to repair. I wish that were true, but that is not the case. So we do have these very real needs within our district. And really what we're hoping for, or what we are projecting based on what we know right now, is that we as a district are not going to ask for 1 cent more in taxes next year than we asked this year. That's what we can control, and that's what we know right now.
So being a employee of the district, I see this from a couple different avenues. First question, the Riverview's roof has been mentioned a number of times. I don't think a lot of people in the community understand that our budget has not gone up. Now, I've been here for 11 years, and our budget has not increased 1 penny in that 11 years. And I don't know of anyone that knows that operational portion of it, when that was last increased. So just as an example, if that roof at Riverview would fail, we would not have the money in the budget to take care of it. Plus you have your gas, your transportation costs, just like everybody at their home has, with those costs increasing every year. My question to you is, if this referendum does not pass, what are we going to cut? Where are we going to cut? What's that going to look like? Because budget-wise, I know all the things that we do, we can't afford to cut anything there. Are we looking at cutting programs? I'm an athletics guy. Are we cutting athletics? Where are those hard cuts going to be coming from? And I think the community needs to understand that we can't keep on functioning the way we are. There's just no way of doing it with just the cost of living going up. What is going to have to be those cuts?
So one of the things that, like right off the bat, is we wouldn't have money to put into our deferred maintenance, that we would be ultimately kicking the can down the road again and hoping that we don't have major failures in those areas. The other thing that we would have to be considering is staff salary freezes, and then it comes to the discussion of, do you lose quality staff to go someplace else in those situations? Look, and as I say these, these are like not good options, but options. Do we look at class sizes that we have? Do we look at long-term programming cuts that we have, that we have electives that we can't offer moving into the future as well? So those are all the things that we look at that are like, that it's not what you want to have as a district for bringing kids in and educating kids and bringing staff in and educating staff. It would be difficult and it would be detrimental.
Okay. What is the current per pupil dollars that the district currently gets through?
Great question. This year, the number was about 11,777. There's some odd state intricacies that go into that, but that was about the number. I also wanted to touch on, in the effort of transparency, we do as a district have a fund balance. So we do have money that has accumulated over time. The last 3 or 4 years, that number has shrunk significantly. We're looking at it shrinking a large amount this year again. But a healthy fund balance is somewhere between 25 and 30%. This year we dipped under that amount. And it may sound like a lot, but the way funding works throughout the district or throughout the state is we don't get all our money in equal chunks throughout the year. So we have to use that fund balance to cover our expenses during the year. And we, as a district, have been able to put off short-term borrowing by having a moderately healthy fund balance. But sometime in early December, we do get down to a very small percentage of fund balance of available money. And what happens if you short-term borrow is that you, of course, are charged money for that money that you have to borrow. So if you can at all do it, it's better for the students, the staff, the taxpayers, if you don't have to short-term borrow as a district. And this board has done a fantastic job avoiding that for the last number of years. So I just wanted to touch on that very briefly.
So just a couple quick questions. In terms of our budget, is it district or is it by school? How do we break that down?
Good question. So the district as a whole has one giant budget, right? The big budget, and then individual schools, programs, departments, they have smaller budgets. But in terms of a budget holistically, it's the district.
Okay, follow up to that. How, if this referendum is passed, to be fair, how is that then dispersed equally, to be fair, if you will?
Good question. Do you mind if I? Any adjustments in staff pay would of course be across the board, so that would be equally. I do think it would be important to address our highest need, maintenance needs, our highest need issues. So that may be occurring at a specific school with a more immediate need. We keep using the Riverview roof, but that is a good example.
Okay, thank you for those. With the new closures of the schools, I'm assuming that those will be up for sale. Will that be an option to go towards our deficit?
Yes, they are up for sale. So we're in the process right now of getting appraisals on them and beginning the process of selling that. But I'm leery of thinking, because I think when you think about constructing a school, that it costs this money to construct and it's significant. The sales of schools are quite different than that one, because unless you're looking for a school, you probably don't get optimal price for it. And so there's been, like when we looked at Wausau East, when it sold, the old Wausau East, it sold for about $70,000. So it would be a one-time gain that we would get, and it certainly would go towards offsetting some of that cost. But I don't know what that dollar amount's going to be, and I don't know how quickly we're going to be able to sell those.
If any of them go for 70,000, I'll buy them.
Well, that's right. And quite honestly, from administrators, we want to be very careful about how we do that, because we want to make sure that we're intelligent about how we're selling that, so that we don't end up in that situation. For us, part of the struggles that we have with the schools is we also are maintaining the liability for the maintenance of those buildings until we can offload them to somebody. Gotcha.
I do have a daughter going through the Wausau School District, in particular at Red Granite. I can't help but feel like Red Granite is the redheaded stepchild here, where nothing is. Each decision is, well, we'll wait and see on that. My question, we need a permanent home. What are the options that we have available right now to utilize one of those particular schools, in particular Hawthorne Hills, which just happens to have, a conservation parcel connected to it with trails? Is that an option?
So I'm part of a transition team actually with the Red Granite leadership as well. So we've been exploring all of our schools. We've explored school forests. We've explored the purchase of some of the buildings. So we're in the process of that right now. Where they're at is there's a parcel that's owned by the school district out by school forest that's somewhat separate. And they're very interested in a site development where they could end up fundraising and building on to that area to build their own school. So that's really that's the focus that we have right now. We've talked specifically about, my concern is what's the fallback plan for that if that doesn't work and we don't get there. We've explored different elementary schools that we have, and we do have a couple that would have space for them moving into. But I think they really believe that would be a temporary fix, and they're looking for the long-term home.
And that's my concern. It's always a temporary fix. We have an empty school, and although the school forest land is a good idea in theory, that's not going to be ready for next year. And you can speak more on that too. But it's more of building costs and why not utilize things that are already in our possession?
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that actually with you if you'd stick around for a little bit, because I do
You
have some
bet.
thoughts on it.
Yep. I think that's all I had so far. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to preface this by explaining why I think these taxpayers are somewhat skeptical anytime that the schools come to ask us for more money. Just recently, we went through a whipsaw back and forth about closing elementary schools. Then we were going to have one high school, and of course the ensuing, what do we name the team? Of course, that's always top of the list, but that's irrelevant in this discussion. But I think what does not instill confidence in the taxpayer is when you have a situation like we did with the consolidation. We were at the 11th hour and probably almost the 59th minute of doing it. And somebody raised their hand and said, we don't have enough science rooms. Oh my God, how did that happen? And that blew the budget, and the whole deal was off. You know, we've got administrators receiving, and I use the word receiving, not earning, receiving six-figure incomes, and good six-figure incomes. Where were they in this process? My God, who's in charge? And that's what I'm saying, it doesn't instill confidence. So all that being said, I'm looking at the pie chart up there, and it shows a budget deficit of 3.7 million. And each year that keeps growing, and we're supposed to be putting out this $8 million a year for the next 4 or 5 years to cover this. And then it's a one-time deal. Well, when we get to the end of 2030, we've still got a budget deficit. Then we're going to be talking about this again, aren't we? And this revenue cap that's in, you know, where does that come from? Does the state tell us that there's a revenue cap and we have to have this vote to go over the revenue cap? Is that where it comes from?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, it seems to me we're going to be in this till hell freezes over, it looks like. I mean, what are we going to do 5 years from now? The revenue cap is still going to be an issue, I think, because it looks like we don't have enough money. Now, I live in the town of Stettin, and I'm in the Wausau School District, and my kids all went through the system here. But part of town of Stettin is in the Marathon School District. Well, at the last town board meeting last spring, a representative from the Marathon School District spoke at our annual meeting. They are full up out there. They can't take any more students because there are students that are going there from other districts and transferring. Apparently they're doing something right, that they're drawing all these students, and we're losing students. It's just an observation.
And I will talk about the state funding model. You're right about that the revenue caps do come from the state. And part of the process has been the push for increased referendums within school districts. So you see this, there's been a huge increase of school districts going to referendum for that exact same reason. So some school districts, I believe Stevens Point just passed an $18 million per year operating or referendum. I don't know if it's, I believe operating referendum as well. So school districts are doing this because they don't have enough money to finance their district because of the revenue caps that are in place. So what you said is accurate. So.
This question is for Josh. Do you know what the cost is for the 3 schools, complete operating cost for the maintenance, staffing at the 3 schools that are closing?
Do I have that data? Yes. Do I know it off the top of my head? No, I apologize, I do not.
Ballpark?
I can get you the information. I'd be happy to talk through it with you, but I really don't. I will say that we will of course maintain some of that maintenance cost and utility cost as long as we have those buildings, and that most of our staff are moving with the students to the new schools. So it's not as if we're eliminating that all from our budget.
That'd be the follow-up question. The staffing, complete staffing from these 3 schools. Now, let's say you have a first grade class at Riverview that's got 17 students, and you have one at Hewitt, Texas that's got 10 students. Those 10 students are coming first grade to Riverview. So now you have one teacher teaching 17 kids and another teacher doing 10 kids.
Or one teacher teaching 27 kids.
And what happens to the other teacher?
Yep, so that's one of the things that we know that we talked about during the elementary task force, is that we have natural staff attrition every year, so we have retirements, resignations, moving on. So this year, we were able to place all of the teachers from the closing schools into classrooms. One of the things we talked was we didn't want to lay off, we didn't want to reduce staff through firings, right, or those things, and we don't have to. It's going to actually work out really well that all the teachers have a spot to be. And with the consolidation, we're actually balancing off our class sizes. So rather than having the 6 and the 27, we're much more consistent with our class sizes without having to raise or increase our cap for our class sizes.
Next question from the previously person was about the homeschooling. My granddaughter, where we are at that situation with state schools, where the reason she's going to Red Granite is because of the curriculum in the Wausau School District. If Red Granite fails, she will not be going to a public school because of the curriculum and the way they're educating. And we're not quite sure why they continue to educate the way they are without listening to other possibilities. So we'll be leaving for that reason, checking out, hey, Marathon, let's go to Marathon.
Yeah.
For that reason, because of the way you operate.
Yeah. One of the things that we're working closely with Red Granite, what I believe in or what I think is very important is choice on things, right? So if families are more interested in Red Granite, we want that to be an option for families. If they would like the more traditional, we'd like that to be an option as well. So we're very cognizant of that, of making sure we have options for families.
Josh, you mentioned the fund balance, and you mentioned about 5-6 times, you never said the amount. Well, how much is in that fund?
So I think this year it's just like 28.7 million. But again, I don't have the number right in front of me, but I think it's right around there. But our total operating budget as a district is, somewhere around 115 million, so.
What's the 28 million? The operating budget comes out of the fund balance?
Nope,
No.
The fund balance is separate.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like a rainy day fund. It's basically, it's for unexpected things that weren't budgeted.
I don't like to think of it that way, because we do have to use it to fund the operations of the district throughout the year. At one point, I think it was last year, our balance got down to somewhere around 3 million, which again sounds like a lot, but we have 1,300 employees and 8,000 students, so it's, as a percentage of our overall budget, it's quite small.
Cale, do you know what the average ACT scores are at East and West?
I don't know, right off that 19 would be my guess, I think, the last time that I checked them.
Yeah, last I looked, I think they're 18.6, and they've gone down every year since 1980. And I don't know what we can do to get them back up there. I don't know if ACT is not a good measurement, but you got to use some sort of a benchmark, and it seems to be the standard one, that and the other one, I just forgot the name of it, but it just seems to keep putting more money in, and recently, they're talking about, for a long time, they're talking about education and amount spent per pupil, and that we're the highest in the developed world per pupil, and we're at 40th in our test scores, and we were at 38th last year. So it's just something's not going right, and the ACT scores, they're about 18.6, I believe. I think West was a little lower than East last year. West is 25% proficient in math and 31% proficient in English. We got to get that up there, but we keep putting more money in, and that doesn't seem to work. It didn't work at building that fancy Wausau East. It didn't help any test scores. I just don't understand, why we can't figure out what other countries are doing and work on that. I don't know. I'm not expert at it, but I know you are because you're the position holder of that. So I was hoping you could answer some of those questions, why our test scores are just plummeting.
I can answer a couple.
Yeah. Well, you can answer. I'll give you the mic in a minute. And then I was thinking about the building at the Longfellow building. We have the offices in there, but East is 65% occupied. Why don't we just move those in there and sell that too, and get that off the tax roll, or back on the tax roll for somebody developer? They could put some nice apartments in there. That'd be an idea. I mean, it's a nice building. I went to kindergarten there. I took little naps on the mat there, and I just think that should be looked into a little bit. I don't know why, if we're paying for a building, we got space available, we could wall off some stuff. But I know it's nice down there at Frenzel Street or Seymour Street down there. Yeah, it's a beautiful old building. But I don't know, do we need it? Is it excessive for the condition we're in financially? Is it abusing the tax dollars, or? So I just think there's something more efficient that could be done there.
So the board's actually directed us to evaluate that. So that's one of the things, the Longfellow discussion. So it's being assessed right now, and then we're trying to figure out what do you do with it. The struggle with it is it's got about 30,000 square footage of conference rooms and different things that becomes more challenging as to how do you fit that into the bigger building. But it is something that's being discussed, just so you know. And then the testing part is always a challenge because we test all of our kids, and so you look at some of the things that we're compared to. They're not necessarily testing all of their students, and I'm not playing that down like we don't have needs for educating kids, but I'd also say we have amazing opportunities. And I've worked with some of the students that the programs and options that they have right now are really solid and really good for it. So we really need to bring up the kids who are struggling and keep providing for our upper level kids. So. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you have a line item in your budget for the fund balance that you plug in every year as you're trying to decide what the tax levy should be?
You mean like a contribution annually to the fund
No,
balance?
just as you're going through trying to decide how much money you need, do you have a single line that says fund balance, and we want to have 15 million in it or 20 million so that it's plugged into your overall budget?
So not like that, no. We have a fund balance that we have, but it's not factored into what we're doing annually in terms of our overall budget. That's really determined by the number of pupils we have in our district. So the overall budget and the fund balance, though related, aren't figured out the exact same way.
So when your budget's submitted,
Yep.
That's a zero amount. That's just extra money. It's zero, because you don't need any more. You've got it set aside someplace.
Right, we have fund balance that we have, yes.
And how much does that vary? That's a lot, $28 million?
Throughout the year, it varies hugely, yeah.
What do you use it for?
So throughout the year, we don't, and I said this earlier, but I'll repeat myself, it's okay. We don't get our money evenly throughout the year. That's not how the state funding model works. So that fund balance in the fall goes way, way, way down to almost nothing. So we do use it to support our operations. But in terms of, we don't have a contribution amount that we contribute to the fund balance at the end of each year or anything like that.
It's just whatever wasn't spent might go into that, and then you roll it over, but it's not plugged in.
You should be up here doing this, exactly.
Yeah, well, I've done that a few. The other question, I think the number was you had in state aid hadn't kept, I think it was the state aid number, hadn't kept up per pupil by $3,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, is there any, what do you, the state has $5 billion surplus or something like that, that's round numbers. What's your projection on what's going to happen with that money in terms of helping school districts deal with your financial issues? And I'm sitting here thinking if we reject this, it gives you some more leverage to go to the state and say, look it, we need your help. We're a state, we're not each individual community struggling and having to go through these things, and the people feeling like we don't know if we can trust you, we don't know all this and that. But what's your projections going to happen? You've got, I assume, lobbyists down there, and you kind of read the tea leaves.
I don't have any lobbyists down there.
Well.
That'd be great. I can only tell you what the governor's proposed in his budget. I think he proposed $108 additional per pupil this year, along with a change to the special education reimbursement rate. I will say that that same thing was attempted last time during the last biennial budget and did not pass. And I certainly don't know what will happen at the state level for a budget, but we are not counting on any increased revenue. And we are in the same position as many districts throughout our area in our state where we are going to referendum. Marathon has been mentioned a number of times tonight. They passed a very large referendum in terms of percentage of their overall operating budget this fall. So,
How long has some of the issues been on the books for repairs, such as the roof?
well, the South Mountain roof is how many years past its warranty? 15. So.
Okay, so you got some projects out there that need addressing.
Yeah, so CISA 10 did a study for us this fall on our elementary buildings only, where they identified $27 million of deferred maintenance needs, and I think $25 million of recommended building improvements, and that was only in our elementary buildings, none of our secondary buildings.
So we're gonna get into priority. Now you have what we all seen going on at John Muir. I personally do not know exactly what's all going on at John Muir with the pool, auditorium. They did a lot of work here at this building. They did a lot of work for the athletics. They did a lot of work for the field. Now you tell me what's priority? Somebody playing football or a roof?
So do you want me to tackle that?
Sure.
Yeah, great question, thank you. The last referendum in 2022 originally was much larger. And Jim, please correct me anywhere I'm wrong on this. But a good chunk of the work that was meant for the elementary schools was removed from the referendum. $60 million worth of work in the elementary schools was removed from the referendum. Some work did stay in terms of secure entrances and things like that. But I agree that there's a huge amount of need at the elementary schools, and that need was known years ago and was taken out of the referendum, I believe, because the thought was that that's what could pass at that time, and that's what the community would support. And because we were going to go down this path of looking at our elementary footprint. So.
I mean, the outside looks great. Out here by the football fields and the ball fields, looks awesome.
Other questions?
So Josh, this question is probably for you. Question on the funding and bonding. So from a municipality standpoint, I don't know if school bonding is the same way, but in order to get your best rates on your bonds, you have to achieve or maintain a certain bond rating. such as AA or so forth. That also helps you determine what you're going to be paying for, essentially interest on those bonds. As part of that, what goes into that bond rating so you can get those good rates is the amount, one of the components is the amount that you have in your fund balance and all your other debt and how that's all structured. And part of that, to get that bond rating, and to kind of put it in layman's terms, it's kind of like your credit rating. And so to keep a good credit rating, you have to have good debt and a good bond rating. So that's one of the reasons why, as a trustee for Rothschild, we understand that we have to keep our debt, we have to keep some debt on the books. And so we want to try and make sure that the taxpayer understands or receives that their taxes don't go up one year and then drop really. You try and keep it consistent across the board. Because once that debt drops off, then you have to approach the community for a huge amount of money, and your bond rating isn't so good because you don't have enough, or if you drain your fund balance, you don't have that ability to get those good bonds. Am I right in saying or suspecting that it's very similar with the school funding model?
Yeah, everything you said was almost exactly spot on, Rex.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Let me just stay up here in case there's questions. All right. So if you guys have more questions, Josh and I will stay down at the stage until the last person's here to answer as many questions as we possibly can, so please feel free to come on down. What I would close on is just one comment about community confidence. And I do believe that's something that we need to work on. And that's very important for me because we're spending taxpayer dollars, we're spending your dollars. And we want to be strong fiscal agents and strong fiscal partners with you. We also want to provide the best opportunities that we can for our kids. From my perspective, involving the community is the most important thing that we can do, that we're not in this separate of each other, we are in this together. If you have questions or thoughts, do not hesitate to call and let's talk through those things. I think a strong community breeds strong schools and strong schools breed strong communities. So I want to develop that. So I'm going to thank everybody for being here tonight. I know there's other places you'd rather be on a night like tonight other than sitting in an auditorium, but I appreciate all of your thoughts and we will be down here until the last person's here. So thank you.